Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Pete. Another lovely morning out there.
Morning, Chris.
Morning. Hi. Keith, you're catching up.
I don't know. Not going over. One of my granddaughters voted no.
What did she say?
She voted no.
Oh, okay.
Saw her on the video. What do you call it? The FaceTime.
All you need is a
Right.
straw hat.
My youngest daughter, yes, but her daughter said no. But she's 7, so I'm not sure she gets a vote.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning. So, Chris, did my son behave himself?
Yeah, he did.
Thank you for letting him come down.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I enjoyed having him. He seems like a real interesting kid and knows a lot about the trees. So I enjoyed meeting him and talking.
Yeah, he has a master's in forestry resources, so hopefully if he's lucky, maybe he'll be able to grow you a new tree.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Is that Greg Portner?
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Portner.
Uh-oh.
How are you?
Good. How are you, Bill?
Good, thanks. Morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Morning, all.
Morning.
Good morning.
To mute the audio, I have to mute myself.
Good morning to all.
Morning.
Good morning, Steve.
Hey, Phyllis.
Yes, sir.
Hey, how about Monday at noon for those for that bank stuff?
I'll be here. I'll be most likely reviewing payroll at that time, but I can certainly get you set up to look at everything.
All right, so let's plan on that.
All right.
Okay, it's 8 o'clock. Guess we'll call the meeting to order. I guess we should get a roll call to see who's here.
Okay. Keith Durr,
Here.
Thomas Mole,
Here.
Don Gallen. He indicated he would be a little late this morning. Steve Brunner
Here.
and Greg Portner.
Here.
Okay. At this point, any public comment?
Yeah, I want to say a few words, if that's okay. First of all, that the agenda has nothing on it, so there's nothing we can talk. I don't know if we could have had any proposed budget or anything like that, but obviously these agendas are getting smaller and smaller to the point that I don't know why we have an agenda. But the biggest thing I wanted to talk to you regarding this special finance meeting is a trend that I have seen, and I'm appealing to you to consider your policies overall. So what I see is that we are not performing some simple maintenance tasks on borough properties. And the spiral lane is an example, but that's not the only one. There are many of them. And which snowball into higher capital costs. And this is a known principle. If you if you change the oil in your car, you're not going to have to change the car. And that is something that we need, in my opinion, to look at, because we're deficient at that in that aspect. I was just with the code inspectors and we looked at, a private tree that lifts the slab on spiral lane to the point that now it's a tripping hazard. So the question is, why is that tree there? Why wasn't the borough code applied to request the owner to take down the tree before it became a big tree? Now it lifts the slab. Now we have to spend tens of thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money to fix that slab. So, and on goes, like, we're not painting railings, we're not doing simple, cheap maintenance work to prevent further costs down the road. And I appeal to you on this because it seems that, I don't know if there's an interest here because you like to give projects to whomever. I don't know, I'm not gonna accuse you of anything, but it just doesn't make sense. And I've told you many times, I was a plant engineer and, maintenance, and I know how these things work. As simple as that. You change the oil in the gearbox, you don't have to spend capital money on the damn gearbox down the road. So that's all I had to do. I think you have to seriously consider this because the borough needs good, cheap, simple maintenance. Letting things, running things down, it's going to cost us more down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, hearing none. Phyllis, we can start the process.
All right. I do have lots of information to share. I've tried to make things as concise as possible just for ease of display and discussion. So please let me know if you have interest in any detail that I may not cover. Shoot me an email and I will get you an answer. So I'd like to start by reviewing the current year results. Although the deficit was budgeted in the amount of $1,080,000, my best guess with all the information available through Friday, the 23rd, is that 2020 will end with a surplus of approximately $328,000. What I found when I was reviewing all the variances between the year-end projections and the original budget was that there's a lot of significant revenue variances that are offset by similar expenditure variances. What I mean by that is, for example, water and sewer revenues are projected to be down about 5%. Well, then so are the costs for purchasing water from the Western Berks Water Authority and treating the sewer that we pay to the JMA. Recreation revenues are obviously down because the pool opening was delayed, the playground was canceled, the rental facilities were closed. Well, then so are all the costs related to running those programs and all the events that were canceled. I projected permit fees to be collected 200,000 in excess of what was budgeted, but there's a like amount of additional inspection fees that we paid to Craft. They offset each other. Similar comparison when we look at what we will be reimbursed by developers for engineering fees. An equal amount of those fees was paid to McCarthy. All these types of offsetting revenue variances and expenditure variances are not part of this discussion. What I focused on were the items that had a direct impact on the bottom line. There was no offsetting effect. What you also don't see listed in this analysis are real estate taxes. At the end of September, I reported a variance of 310,000. Melissa, could you advance to the next page? When we look at net real estate taxes, 310,000 positive variance when we compared September of 20 to September of 19. Well, that's a result of applying a higher tax rate to a similar assessed value. When those September results are projected forward to the end of the year and compared to what was budgeted, the variance is actually only $1,600. That's not something that's significantly impacting the bottom line. If you move on to the next one, Melissa. Local taxes, however, continue to generate a variance. At the end of September, when compared to the same time last year, the variance reported was 175,000. When the September results are projected through the end of the year and compared to what was originally budgeted, the variance is projected to be 355,000, a negative variance. We go on, we can have the same discussion regarding interest income. Interest income, when reported at the end of September, there's a variance between 19 and 20 of 164,000. When those September totals are projected to the end of the year and compared to the original budget, the interest variance is projected to be 152,000. That's the result of just, we had deferred tax receipts that were sitting at a lower interest rate. Very simple math there. If you could go on, Melissa. Offsetting those negative revenue variances for all the infrastructure projects that were put on hold. When we knew tax revenue may be a problem, and a revised spending plan was adopted, and the only expenditures made towards infrastructure projects were the payment of retainers that pertain to 2019 work. So that when we compare what was actually spent to what was budgeted, the projects alone is a positive variance of 1,400,000. Along with those projects, we had savings on the related engineering costs. That the total savings by having put those projects on hold is 1.5 million. Go on to the next. At the time that the revised spending plan was adopted, most of the capital purchases had already been made or were put on or already on order. The only two purchases that we were able to stop was the purchase of the second police vehicle and the fitness room and related equipment at the firehouse. That was a savings of approximately $89,000. So Melissa, if you can go back to page 1. All those variances we just discussed, a negative variance in local taxes, the negative variance in interest income. There's a positive variance in the Benecon reimbursement. I had been reporting a negative variance when we compared what had been received to what had been received in 2019. The budget was for 125,000. We received 122,000, so we were pretty close to budget. But when we compared that amount to what had been received in 2019, we had a negative variance. Melissa recently attended a Benecon webinar where she learned that an additional 122,000, would be received before the end of the year. So the end result is that the Benecon reimbursement will be a positive revenue variance. That added with the savings from the capital projects turns that 1,080,000 deficit into a surplus of 328,000. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Any questions?
Anybody?
One item of note, that 328,000 does not include 3 grant reimbursements that are pending. We have applied for the balance of the alley grant that initiated in 2019 from the Conservation District. We received initial reimbursement for alley projects. The county funding was delayed, and now we've been notified that the county funding is available again. So we are looking at additional 40,000 from the Conservation District. At this point, I don't know if that's going to be received in 20 or 21. So that has not yet been included as part of the estimates.
Phyllis, are those projects that are completed and paid for?
Correct.
Okay.
The alley work was complete in 2019.
So these are all projects that are out of the cash dollars. They're gone.
They are. We're waiting for reimbursement.
Okay.
It's just we're so close to the end of the year. I'm not certain whether to include it in the projection to end the year for 20, or if I should include it in anticipated revenue for 2021.
And what's the total of all those projects?
Of the 3 projects is 439,000. I'll get to the detail of the additional projects. On October 16th, we submitted to the county for a CARES Act reimbursement for COVID expenses that had been incurred through September 30th. That potential reimbursement is 96,000. Pat, have you heard anything more about if or when that might be received?
No, I know they're currently under review by the county commissioners, and we hope to hear something any day.
Okay. Lastly, the first reimbursement request has been made under the DCED grant for the engineering costs that have been incurred to date. All those invoices have been gathered and transmitted. Michelle uploaded them to the grant assistance gal, and I don't know if DCD has actually received them yet. Michelle, are you on the call?
I am. Colleen's working on getting all of that uploaded to DCED this week. Our hope is that the first reimbursement payment should be forthcoming in the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay, so that's an additional 303,000. If that were to be received, that would be something that I would like to add to the reserves. But at this point, that revenue dollar has not been accounted for in either 20 or 21. So
and
those.
Which project's that for, Phyllis?
Excuse me.
Which project's that for?
That's the engineering related to 4th Street.
Okay, so are we gonna create a separate spreadsheet just for 4th Street project showing the expenditures to date and then on an ongoing basis?
Yes, that would be part of the capital project reporting.
Okay, but we talked about having an individual one for each particular project.
Yes, and I have been doing that.
Okay.
Okay, so Melissa, if you could pass all the variances to the fund balance. Okay, so we started 2020 with a fund balance of 8.3 million. If we add to that the projected surplus of 328,000, the overall fund balance would be 8.6 million. We've identified 4 particular projects that we would like to create reserves for, to separate from the overall fund balance funds that are committed for future projects. What's been identified so far is future work for MS4, that would be for the Wyomissing and the Tulpehocken Creeks. In 2020, there was insurance proceeds received for a police car that was totaled. The car will not arrive until 2021. The insurance proceeds that will offset that purchase are 17,000. Renovations to Borough Hall, that would be phase 2, as well as a $10,000 retainer that is holdover from phase 1, total 630,000. And the sewer upgrades that were approved and awarded in October, the work won't start until January of 2021. That bid came in at just under 160,000. Those 4 items together total 1,084,000, which approximates the deficit that was planned for the current year. So if we look at the overall fund balance of 8.6 and we reserve 1,084,000, the unreserved fund balance is 7.5 million. And the only thing that's really concerning about this illustration is that you can see the general fund balance is only 625,000. That's much less than would be ideal. Okay. So any questions with the projected year-end fund balance? No? And keep in mind, those pending grant reimbursements would add to those numbers. The DCED portion could be added to reserves. The alley work grant from the Conservation District and the CARES Act reimbursement could be added to general funds, unreserved. Okay.
Say that again, Phyllis.
So we have 3 outstanding grant reimbursements.
Right.
I suggest that the money received for the 4th Street engineering be included as part of the reserves.
Phyllis, if the dollars have already been spent and the bills have been paid to the engineering fees, why would we put them with the reserves versus just offsetting the expenses?
Michelle, could you explain the arrangement with Equus?
Sure. So Equus agreed up front when we decided to move forward with applying for the grant for 4th Street that they would cover the soft costs for engineering and design up to a limit of 200,000. So as we move forward with the project, actually get the bills from Borowis till everything is done and settled out, we're gonna owe Equus 200,000 at the end of this project.
Yeah, then it makes, yeah, you're right then. Then it makes perfect sense to put it to reserves.
I mean, we could limit the amount that goes to reserves to the 200,000.
Well, we should, I think the only thing that should go to the reserves would be whatever we're going to end up owing Equus. The rest should go in to offset, back into the funds to offset the expenses that were already incurred in 2020.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
That would be my feeling.
Okay, Michelle and I can get together and work out those details. Okay. Regardless, the fund balance that's displayed, the 8.6 total, the 7.5 unreserved, do not include those pending grant reimbursements. Those will be additions to those numbers. Okay? Everyone on the same page?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I understand, so the ones that are not related to 4th Street are $535,000. So if we get all 3 of those projects plus the COVID money, it's $535,000.
No, the total altogether is 439. I have 40 from the alley work, 96 from the COVID expenses, the CARES Act reimbursement, and 303 on engineering fees, for a total of 439.
Okay, I was adding the 96. I thought that was separate.
Okay?
Yep.
All right. So that wraps up 2020 and establishes the beginning fund balance for 2021. If we want to move on and see the staggering number for 2021 draft one, all in with all capital projects, the deficit is 3.5 million. It's very similar to the starting deficit for draft one in 2019. That deficit was a starting amount of 3,056,000. So if we were to look at the next page, you'll see the effect of that deficit on the fund balance. If we look at total fund balance, the 8.6 million with a 2021 deficit of 3.5 would leave us with an overall fund balance of $5 million. If, however, we start with the unreserved fund balance and add the deficit, we'd have to reverse out the items that were previously reserved. So we would reverse out everything but the MS4 because that money will not be expended in 2021. That is for future use. So we would have an unreserved fund balance of 4.8 million, a reserve balance of 277, continuing to carry the MS4 money, and we would still reach the same total fund balance of 5.84. Does that make sense to everybody, how the reserves work? So the budget does not change. We're just applying amounts that had previously been reserved. Make sense?
Good news is you have more giraffes, right?
I do. I have lots of drafts. Not all. All right. So in order to digest a $3.5 million deficit, can you move on, Melissa? Okay. I identified the capital projects that are included in that 3.5 million. And we'll get to the detail when we look at expenditures. I just wanted to identify both the capital funding and the capital expenditures that are contributing to the deficit.
Hold on, Phil. Melissa, which I'm looking at my email too, so I can see it in bigger form. Which worksheet you on?
That would start the revenue tab.
Oh, okay.
From the email, you want to open up the revenue tab.
Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. So I've identified the pieces of the 3.5 deficit that are related to capital items. There's both funding and expenditures. So if you move on to the next slide, I've started with the 3.5, identified the capital funding and expenditures, and what's left is the operating revenues and expenditures, which is, you can see, is a break even, a small deficit in the general fund, the refuse fund and the highway fund, surpluses in the water and sewer fund. They all net to a surplus of 245,000. So what I like to do is focus on the general fund revenue. It's just where we have an opportunity to raise funds. If you're looking at a deficit, you can either raise revenue or cut expenditures. I like to look at raising revenues first. Okay?
Oh, can you go back to the last slide again for a minute? What's the difference between funded and unfunded?
Well, the top portion, I tried to simplify this as in the top portion are projects that we have the potential to receive funding for. For example, 4th Street, those costs will be covered.
Right. What for Borough Hall renovations?
We have the opportunity to do short-term borrowing with the arrangements we made with VIST. The 2020 budget included borrowings. We did not utilize them, but that was part of our funding. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm not sure we should look at, I think funding might come after we look at the whole of the projects. But
right, and that's why I haven't included anything in draft one. That's why the funding is zero until we make a decision down the road.
And so in this slide, where is the 160,000 from last year's or this year's capital sewer, is that in the 460?
No, it's not. Because we're still evaluating the total deficit and not the deficit without the reserves.
Right, but that's part of the 160.
It's not part of funding.
Okay. But it's part of the capital expenses.
It is, yes. That's the capital sewer is a very last line of the unfunded projects.
So, but is that the 160's in there then?
The 160 expenditure.
Right.
And 300 planned for 2021.
Okay, and then like the MS4, where's that?
That's not going to be expended this year or next year. That's years out.
But we're budgeting. Aren't we going to add dollars to that this year in the capital budget?
We can reserve more fund balance for 2021.
But that's not anywhere in the budget right now.
No, it's not. Okay. All right. So again, if we start with a deficit of 3.5 million and we back out the capital items that have been identified, we're left with what would be considered operating. And when I refer to operating, I'm not referring to turning on the lights. I'm referring to the borough operating and providing the same level of service as we have in the past. And that would include recreation programs and the library and so forth. That's not part of turning on the lights per se, but it's a level of service that the borough has come to be expected to provide.
But there are no capital projects. There's no police cars. There's no roof for the library. There's none of that in that number.
Those have all been backed out with the middle columns.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
So if we focus on the general fund revenue, which is 11,890,000, Melissa, could you please advance? I look to the different sources of revenue. The real estate taxes are approximately 36% of the total general fund revenue. All other local taxes combined to be about 40%. Overhead transfers are about 9%, and so forth, fees for service, licensing. So we want to look at the revenues and whether we have the ability to control them.
Phyllis, sorry to keep interrupting. I apologize, but it's hard because I can't see. I don't have two screens like Steve does. I should. Do you know how this? You have a slide that compares this revenue projection to last year and the year before?
I don't have a slide ready. I can certainly send something to you. As I said, for display purposes, I did not try to overwhelm you with information.
Okay.
Okay. Melissa, can you move on? All right. So real estate taxes are a function of the current, let me get advanced here. The real estate taxes are derived by applying the current millage to the assessed value. The borough can control the millage. The borough cannot control the assessed value. That's provided by the county. When the bills were printed in January of 20, the assessed value was $1,023,000,000. When the Finance Committee met earlier this month, I had received an abstract from the county with an assessed value of $1,038,000,000. But we knew at the time the results of all the hearings had not yet been posted, all the appeal hearings. I did receive that information about a week ago, and we learned that the new assessed value has dropped to $1,020,000,000. That's a decrease of 18 million. What we found when reviewing the detail is that the Berkshire Mall was decreased from 29 million to about 15 million, as was the Mall West was decreased from 9 million to 8 million. Those two alone account for about 16 million of the decrease. There is one more assessment to be processed, and that is actually expected at the end of this week, which will give me any stray notices that may have posted. But our starting point is 1,020,000,000.
And our starting point last year was 1,023,000,000.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. So if we look at how that assessed value, if you can move on, Melissa. All right. If we take the current assessed value of 1,020,000,000 and apply the current millage of 4.25, the potential tax to be collected is 4,335,000. Not all of that tax is ever collected. There's exonerations that occur, and just people that don't pay and it becomes delinquent and turned over to the county. So in the 2021 proposed budget, I've included just 4,200,000 to reflect the fact that not everything will be collected, and there still is a potential for the assessed value to decrease. Okay, so that's the starting point. If you were to consider increasing the millage to generate additional tax, each millage, each tenth of a mill at the current assessment would generate approximately 100,000 in additional revenue. And I've listed a couple different scenarios. At a tenth of a mill, it'd be 100,000. At a half a mill, it'd be 500,000. A full mill would raise an additional $1 million in tax revenue. It, however, would represent a 23% increase, which would not be palatable to the residents. But that's our starting point. So before considering a tax increase, I'd like to compare Wyomissing to Spring and to the surrounding area. So Miss Melissa, can you move on? All right. Wyomissing simplified its tax structure in 2020 by eliminating the road tax so that the full millage of 4.25 is for general purposes. In Spring, however, they have two different assessments. One is for the township, one is for fire protection. They combine to be 4.45. There's additional assessments in Spring Township for neighborhoods that have street lighting and for neighborhoods that have fire hydrants. So that the effective rate is actually 5.875 if you live in one of those neighborhoods. And if you look at the 4.45, Melissa, can you move forward? The county rate sheet shows rates for all municipalities. You can see where Spring falls at the 4.45, Wyomissing at the 4.25, Shillington 7.14, West Reading 9.85. You see where Wyomissing is on the low side when compared to surrounding municipalities. Melissa, if you can go further. Sample tax bill for a property assessed at $100,000 at the current Wyomissing millage, the municipal tax bill would be $425. That same tax assessment in Spring would be $509. And then I have a list of proposed increases and what that tax bill would look for each $100,000 of property assessment. So that is a potential source of raising revenue for the general fund. So is there any discussion or suggestion to increase the tax rate to incorporate into the next draft?
Do you have a history of tax increases for the last few years for Wyomissing?
I do. Melissa, if you could back up, I think about 2 or 3 pages. There you go. In 20, we increased the tax by, make it just a little bit bigger, 0.35. That was an 8.97% increase. That was the first such increase since 2014. So that's your history there.
Okay. Well, you're asking us to put in a potential tax increase for the working, but I'd like to see what expenses we can figure out that maybe don't need to be put into the budget for the next year.
Okay, all right, we'll circle back to that. That is a potential revenue source. You'd like to go on?
If I can, Phyllis, so let me just make one comment. Even though the borough tax is the smallest portion and we are lower than the surrounding communities, the overall tax burden for all three sources is much higher than surrounding communities, and we need to keep that in mind. All we're doing is adding to that burden. So just want to make that. Our Berkshire Heights residents have a much lower tax burden because they're in the Wilson School District.
Correct.
But for those of us, or for the majority that's in the Wyomissing School District, it's a substantial difference. So I'm making, that's my public comment on tax increases. I think everybody knows where I stand on tax increases.
So Greg, you're talking about total overall, including school taxes.
That's correct, because that's really what comes out of people's pockets. This is just one part of it, smallest part, I understand that, but every dollar, there are still people unemployed due to COVID. I'm just throwing this information out. I don't see it getting any better much, anytime soon.
Agreed. We understand.
Okay, moving on. Could you advance one slide, Melissa? All right. Collectively, the other local taxes account for 40% of the general fund revenue. It's our single largest source of revenue. Unfortunately, the borough has absolutely no control over any of these taxes. I've taken the results from 2020 and I have proposed amounts for 2021. It's entirely possible that I have been too optimistic. It's equally possible that I have been too conservative. Although we have no control over these numbers, the amounts that we propose may affect decisions we make regarding spending for 2021. So the question I'm throwing out there, is there any recommendation to use numbers other than what's been proposed? I've tried to account for a slight rebound without being too optimistic. I don't have a crystal ball. These are my best guess. Does anyone have any better guess?
So I just want to make sure I'm looking at this correctly, Phyllis. The 20, just use the first one, real estate transfer tax. Your budget is $15,000 higher than our budgeted 2020. Wait, I'm sorry.
No, we budgeted 400,000.
I'm sorry.
And I'm
It's
projecting
15,000 more than the projected. Okay, I got it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
I'm looking at the wrong thing.
So I'm hopeful that the market will rebound. We certainly see signs of that in the second half of the year. So I don't want to be overly optimistic and plan an increase, but
Right.
I'm hopeful that it will be, return to what it was.
And you're assuming a $150,000 loss of earned income tax revenue based on the budget of 2020.
Correct. So rather than budgeting 2.7, I budgeted 2.6, slightly more than the current year projection. But
the reason why Missing's mercantile tax is positive and Wilson's is negative is because we think that they may have reimbursed us more than we should have gotten back from Wilson.
no, we don't receive the detail of a business by business to be able to track that. But we had budgeted 200,000. We've already received 206,000 because I've already received the October. So I project to end the year with just another 9,000, which I think is very reasonable, for a total of 215. You could say the 225 should only be 200 or 210. I have no concrete reason to not take any suggestions to increase or decrease that.
Okay, no, and I'm sorry. I guess my question is, we're looking at the Wyomissing School District's mercantile tax going up, but the Wilson's going down. Does it remind me of, didn't we get a lower reimbursement from Wyomissing? I forget how that all, I'm trying to figure out how that all played out.
Yeah, no, I'm just going based on what was collected this year.
Okay, all right. So you're just going to based on the collections rate of this year. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can certainly tweak those numbers.
So we're anticipating a reduction in total tax, a reduction of $355,000, what we're anticipating. Okay. Which would be to offset that in real estate taxes would be 3.35 points of a mill.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. So are there any suggestions to change any of those proposals?
We haven't gotten any guidance from anybody out there from the state.
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I assume that we have to figure that the mercantile taxes will overall be down, the local services tax would be down.
Well, there's two scenarios with mercantile tax. One would be that some businesses paid the full estimate, and when they do their finals in 2021, they may find they've overpaid. Other businesses may have realized that the estimate had been reduced, paid a lesser amount, and now are going to owe more in 2021. You know, both scenarios could apply.
Okay.
Okay. Any further comments regarding local taxes?
Moving on.
All right. Additional 9% of the general fund revenue is actually derived from transfers from the utility funds. There's no stated limits to these amounts. Each time it's increased, the auditors asked me to justify why. To date, they've been satisfied with all the explanations I provided. Basically, the overhead transfers cover indirect costs. Any kind of administrative cost, payroll-related costs related to the direct wages that are charged, general insurance, vehicle maintenance, gas, oil, you know, all those things are what's proposed to be covered by the overhead transfer. So we could increase the amount transferred from the utility funds to the general fund. It would not change the overall picture, but it would transfer money from the utility funds whose fund balances are healthy to the general fund that needs a little boost. So.
At what point do you look at the rates that are being charged for these services? I know Jim Babbitt mentioned on one of the discussions that there may be some opportunity there.
All right, that would be the next slide.
The next slide.
Okay, sorry. Sorry.
All right. In 2020, water and sewer rates were raised 5%. That was the first such increase since 2014. When we compare the Wyomissing rates to the surrounding communities, that would be on the next two charts Kim put together for me. There we go. You can see that Wyomissing in terms of water is on the low side.
And that's Wyomissing, just not including Wyomissing Hills.
Wyomissing Hills would fall under the PA American,
Right.
which would be the highest column.
Yay.
Yeah, me too. And the next slide is the sewer rates. Did we get the sewer rates inserted, Melissa?
I don't see anything here.
I have sewer rates. Well, the sewer rate chart shows that Wyomissing is actually the second lowest.
Okay.
So yes, we do have an opportunity to increase both water and sewer rates. Any discussion or suggestions to do that for draft 2? At this point, the expenses estimated for next year to purchase the water from the Western Berks Water Authority and pay the treatment charges to the JMA are estimates of 3% each.
So back to your proposed overhead transfer, I think it's certainly reasonable since expenses continue to go up, wages go up. It does seem like we should be able to move more and increase that proposed transfer.
Is there any recommendation to change those amounts? Melissa, if you could back up one more slide. There we go. Currently, water is at 300,000, sewer at 650, and refuse at 175. I've made no change in draft 1 for 2021. So are the recommendations to change those numbers?
Phyllis, if I recall from an earlier slide, wasn't there a huge surplus built up in the refuse?
All utility funds do have very healthy fund balances. The projection for operations for those funds, there are deficits in the, I think just in the refuse fund. Melissa, can you back up a little bit more? And more. Yeah, we have to go past all the revenue pages. There we go. When we move the capital items and look at the operating, you see the water fund operating surplus without the capital projects, 320, sewer fund, 84, a small deficit in the refuse fund, and we will talk about the refuse fund in just a minute. If you back up further,
I don't know where I saw that then, and who knows?
No, you can, there's a fund balance for each of the funds. Keep going backwards. And back further. There we go. Up. Here we go. If you look at the water fund, the fund balance, 2.2 million, sewer, 3.9 million,
okay.
refuse, 862.
So let me ask a question, and I've been involved long enough, and I should know better than to ask this, but we have an unreserved fund balance in the refuse of $702,000. Where would that be useful on ongoing refuse charges? Perhaps an increase for dumping that we wouldn't pass along to residents. You know what I mean? Where is that $702,000 useful going forward?
What was the amount, Greg, you're talking about?
Unreserved fund balance of refuse is 702,000. Am I looking at that correctly, Phyllis?
You are correct.
Okay.
Shouldn't that 160 be over under sewer, not under refuse?
Oh, you're right. That is in the wrong column.
Okay, so you took away 1/4 of my fund balance already.
Well, no, actually, you increased it to 860 from 702.
Reserving some of that. All right, so my point again is, where would we use that? The only thing I can think of is that we would get an increase in the fees, our dumping fees from the refuse company, and we wouldn't pass that along to our residents. That would be the only thing that I'm thinking of that where we could eat up that 860,000. Or do we transfer a lot of that? I know it's all fund balance is fund balance. Transfer some of that to the general fund to help make up some of this difference. That's if we're considering transferring funds from our utilities. I mean, there's a big chunk right there that we may not need.
Well, Greg, because the refuse fund was actually throwing a deficit for the current year or for 2021, I was actually going to compare the refuse fee to what's charged in spring and discuss the possibility of a refuse fee increase.
Oh boy.
Yeah, the Wyomissing fee at $62.50 a quarter totals $250 per year. The spring fee for refuse is $310 per year. It's actually assessed on the tax bill itself rather than billed quarterly.
Sure.
With the number of customers that we bill, if we raised it just to 300, which would still be lower than spring, it would raise an additional 158,000. The reason there's
a big one for comparing us with spring and some of those other townships surrounding. I mean, Wyomissing is Wyomissing, and what does it cost for our services? You know, we have some older residents. Yeah, you have a lot of new people moving in. One person puts one little bag out every week, and they're going to pay $310 a year. I don't know.
I agree with that.
Comments.
Wait, hang on. So yeah, Greg, I kind of am in agreement with Greg in this particular case. I mean, if we're comparing it to spring, I do think you have to look at the overall tax burden, which is what Greg's talking about. And I mean, my feeling is that if we do have some excess funds in there and we can't actually reimburse it because we receive dollars back that from dumping fees and so on. I think this is an opportunity to give back to the residents as opposed to taking more away. I would prefer to see us hold steady, at least on the refuse, and maybe look at water and sewer, and then get maybe them more in line with usage. But I would think what Greg's saying is correct. I would not do refuse.
Okay.
I suggest
Let's keep in
something
mind,
that
water
you
and sewer
discussed
taxes
before.
are a user fee. The more you use, the more you're going to pay.
So there you're actually being charged for what you're using. And if we're out of line on those, that's an opportunity to get in line with others. I think that's where the opportunity should be, not in refuse. And I agree with Greg. Maybe we should take in addition to, even though we're going to have a $46,000 deficit and $862,000 surplus in refuse, certainly I think gives you an opportunity to transfer some of that to the general fund to offset some of the deficit.
Yeah, that's all I'm trying to say.
I agree with you, Greg.
May I suggest something
Steve,
that we discussed?
excuse me, Steve.
Yes.
Just to throw out there as a reminder, we still don't know what Governor Wolf's going to be doing as far as what our refuse and recycling monies could be next year. We could potentially not get anything because that's his initial inkling, is he wants to remove all that to take care of other funds related to COVID. So we don't know what's going on with that yet.
Was he proposing a complete elimination, Bill, or was he just looking at a reduction?
I'm hearing a complete elimination. That's what we got from the State Refuge and Recycling Association.
And what portion of our revenue comes from that?
I'll have to divert to Melissa, or I mean Michelle on that one. Or Phyllis, what am I saying?
I guess, Phyllis was throwing us some scenarios. I think all this has to be considered. We got a little ways to go to this budget's final. So just some considerations.
As I look at the refuse budget for 2021, fees for service account for approximately $790,000. 100,000 was counted on by state reimbursement. Some of that was going to be the performance grant, and the rest was going to be the equipment grant that has been applied for and is currently pending. What I see when I compare the history of the refuse fees is that our revenues have dropped because we no longer bill a portion of the community where we were providing service that actually fell under the commercial entities rather than the residential. So we have reduced the number of customers that we bill, but the contract costs continue to escalate each year. And that's where we will see a small erosion of the fund balance going forward.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, may I say 2 words here that you've never considered, and Mr. Portner brought it up briefly. The refuse, it is a flat fee, and yes, it is terribly unfair for the people who just put a small bag out. And maybe you can look at restructuring that fee and make it like a per use fee, and have the households that put out more pay more, and it can be done very easily. And maybe we can save money for some people and just make it more fair, I would say. How would that play out with a budget? It's up to you, but I think that would certainly be something to look at.
And thank you, Mr. Jadick, just for a point of reference, the public comment was at the beginning of the meeting. Thank you.
We also provide many services that are not done by a use fee, like roads, parks, and other things.
Yeah. I mean, at some point we can't put a toll on every road that I drive down and pay basically based on my mileage of drive on the road.
That is a completely different, this is not a use.
Mr. Jadick, thank you. Moving on.
All right. So the question is regarding water and sewer rates. Is there any changes you'd like me to make in draft 2 pertaining to water and sewer revenues? Or do we like to get to the end and circle back?
I'd like to get to the end and circle back, to be honest with you.
All right. All right, so we looked at the potential sources of increased revenues. The other side of this equation is, of course, the expenditures. All right. One more, Melissa. All right. Included in the operating budget are a few items that I'd like to raise for discussion, have always been discussion points in past years. The contribution to the Western Berks Ambulance Association for ambulance services. We currently contribute $25,000 each year. That was increased in 2018. It was previously 15,000. Each year they request that we consider contributing based on our population. We've declined that request and have just made a flat contribution. Is there any discussion or comment to change the amount or the method of contribution to the Ambulance Association?
Listen, my opinion on the Ambulance Association is that they are vital. They're vital to this community. We've seen a dramatic restructuring of Western Berks to the point that I believe that they're not losing money hand over fist. But if we're going to increase revenue more than the $25,000, I believe it would have to be in some form of an EMS tax or something along those lines. So as much as I want to see them get more reimbursement, I'm not sure we can do it just out of the general fund as opposed to maybe potentially having a EMS tax, if you will.
Steve, ultimately, and Tony had mentioned this yesterday, they would like to see, a membership structure of, I believe it was $30.
Yeah, they want $30 per, is it household or per employee?
Per household, yeah. I thought it was household.
Okay. Which PDF are we on now? I'm sorry.
We are in the expenditures.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So any suggestion to change what's been proposed for 2021? To leave it at 25,000.
Bill, do we know what the number of calls that EMS did versus 2020 versus 19?
I can go back and get those numbers. On an average, we're running, let's just say 225 calls per month. And that excludes the Highlands and Country Meadows.
The issue we've always had with Western Berks is that I keep saying employees, it's work, that the residents have insurance that helps pay for that cost. But more and more you're finding that there are large copays or large deductibles that employees, especially those who use their services more, which on average is our older population. I have mixed emotions on it myself because their personal insurance would cover some of those expenses, but not all of them.
But the $25,000 doesn't help those individuals with their copay. This is just a pure donation.
This is a pure donation, correct?
Right. So I think my personal opinion, with all the other expenses going on and the decreased revenues, I think it's a pure donation. They're getting dollars from the insurance company. They're being reimbursed. The residents are continuing to pay it regardless of what their copay is. I would not increase. I don't think it's a good time to increase the contribution.
Well, I'm not insinuating we should increase it. I'm sitting there thinking about potentially somewhere down the road that maybe it is if it's $30, we add a $30 tax for the residents. But I'd like to get some study done on how many people are in Medicare, how many people are personal insurance, if we can find that number, because in general, the Medicare will reimburse them at a significant number where the private insurances will not. But for this purpose, I think we should just keep the $25,000.
I think Tony has, I believe, all that documentation, that he could get to us.
Yeah. Well, I have a whole nother thought process on the EMS process too, but that's not subject to this meeting. So, okay.
Okay. Moving on, the contribution to the library to support their operations. And it previously was $200,000. In 2019, the borough purchased their building and assumed the operating costs in terms of utilities, insurance for the building, maintenance, and so forth. At that time, their operating support was reduced to $172,500 per year to reflect the savings that they incurred. In 2020, they requested an increase to go back to their original funding. That request was denied. For 2021, they are again requesting that the funding be restored to $200,000 due to a reduction of state funding that they are incurring. So at this point, draft 1 includes the amount that they have requested, restoring their funding. Is there any comment or discussion to change that amount to something other than what they have requested?
Well, my thought on this is it is what it is, because if they run at a deficit and they run out of money, we're going to be the ones banking it anyway. But
I mean,
yeah.
I guess the only thing is, where do we go when our funds are cut or the grants are denied or whatever? You know what I mean? So this is strange times right now.
Agreed.
For what I've been able to understand, that, you know, from Vicky, is this is pretty much a break even for them. They, you know, of course they struggled this year, and projection for next year is that, you know, they're going to need this in order to keep the doors open and survive.
And ultimately, if they have to close their doors, we're going to keep them open by funding the
projects, right?
Project,
but
right.
You know, they are pursuing another avenue, you know, but that could just be to, you know, provide the library with, you know, essential supplies from a private donor, but no decision's been made on that yet.
So we're talking about a $28,500 increase.
Correct.
So anybody else in the committee have a thought on this?
I leave it in for the time being and see what else, see how the rest of the budget shakes out.
Okay.
Yeah, we got $3.8 million to deal with here. I think we should move on.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, fair enough. Go ahead.
All right, economic development. Those costs through June of the current year had been reimbursed by Equus. Due to the successful results of both the lobbying service as well as the grant assistance, those services were continued through the end of the year. Each service, the lobby service as well as the grant assistance, runs at a cost of $3,500 per month. Ms. Michelle's recommendation to continue the lobbying service through June of 2021 and the grant assistance through the end of 2021. That would be an additional 17 payments at $3,500 for a total of $66,500. So is there any comment or suggestion to change that plan?
No, I think those are lost leaders. Those are, you know, we're paying for something that we're going to get a bigger return on our investment down the road. So I think it's something that we keep.
Okay.
I'm just one person on the committee.
I agree.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. Some questions about staffing. I recently learned about Tom's retirement, and I've been assisting Tom in gathering costs for a move to a regionalization of the police department. At this point, the 2021 budget still has a budgeted amount for a salary for the chief and a salary for the lieutenant. Should I be removing those amounts?
I would leave everything until after the next meeting. Tom, when's your next meeting?
In November.
Yeah, I would just leave the police exact wherever it was, and then we'll review it after the next meeting, because I think they're going to have some budget numbers coming back, right, Tom? Isn't it this the financial part?
Yes.
I would just leave everything the way it is for now.
Yes.
All right, but it's my understanding that any kind of regionalization would not occur until 2022?
It would be, the earliest it would be the fourth quarter of 2021.
So should we budget for a chief and a lieutenant for those months before that?
For now, we should.
Well, we should, yes.
Okay.
Until we see the budget numbers, we can't do anything until we have seen the budget and the council decides whether we're going to commit to forming that regional police department.
Okay.
Plus, there may be some incremental temporary costs that are associated, either bringing somebody in on a temporary basis that we're going to have to pay. So I would just leave everything in for now.
Understood. All right. I did account for a new hire in the fourth quarter of 20. Is that still on target?
That I would
Yes.
leave it alone right now. I mean,
Okay.
That officer's starting in November.
Okay.
All right. I've also budgeted for one replacement in Public Works in the Parks Department. Is that still on target?
Yes.
should be.
I've also budgeted for a full year for a recreation director. So in the event that that position is filled from the Public Works crew, should I be budgeting for an additional Public Works person or just leave things as is?
I would use that as a placeholder.
Okay.
Yeah, leave it as is for now.
Okay. The other item I just wanted to get onto the radar, one of the things that Tom was going to be working on in 2021 was evaluating cloud alternatives for the borough's phone system. The equipment's very antiquated and it doesn't provide a lot of features that would be beneficial for operations. I haven't really put a lot of money into that, but that's something that I think Pat is interested in moving forward with. Pat, do you have any comments on that or costs that we might include?
Yes, I think you're good on your costs there. We've gotten proposals for all types of different cost ranges. We're trying to stay with, some lower price hardware and evaluate some different alternatives rather than just going to a totally new phone system. So
okay.
if
The amount that's included is actually the cost of all phone service. My question is, should I be bumping that for any kind of move that might occur in 2021?
I think you can leave that exactly at
Just
your
leave it
cost.
as is. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So we looked at the unusual operating items. That leaves us with a very extensive capital list. Melissa, can you move on? All right. To explain this list, I did segregate the projects between those that are potentially funded. We talked a little bit about Borough Hall. I consider that a potential for funding because we can insert into the budget any amount that we choose to advance on the line of credit that is available. At this point, I haven't included any proceeds from borrowings, but that is a source of additional funding if we choose to include it. 4th Street is in at a wash. The multimodal drainage projects. I learned yesterday that my engineering costs are overstated. The number that I used to include with engineering included some FEMA mapping that is no longer necessary. So the funding remains the same at 366. The actual cost for the project will be reduced by 70,000. So the net capital will be reduced from 397 to 327. And I will make that adjustment for draft 2. The parks improvements are the ADA improvements for the Berkshire Heights Playground. Michelle has applied for a grant to fund 85% of those costs. At this time, my understanding is that that grant award will not occur until 2021. So I have not included any potential funding so that we consider whether we would proceed with that project in the event funding did not occur.
Can you state that again? You said the funding wouldn't occur till when?
The award would not occur until 2021. Michelle, do you have any more information on that?
Anticipated sometime in January. That's all I know.
Okay. So as I said, I did not include pending grant awards because we could proceed with the project if the grant did not come through. So as of yet, I have not included any funding there.
Well, I don't think we will. I mean, I don't know that we would move through with the improvements without that. Michelle, it's 85% funding.
Correct. We would be on the hook for $39,664 if we get the grant.
So from a budget standpoint, I put in the $39,000 for the budget and
Right.
take the rest out.
Keith, could you repeat that?
I would put for the net, I would put in 39,000 because if the project's not funded, we wouldn't do it.
Okay. What I would do would add the funding. I can't budget on a net basis. I need to budget separately.
So
Okay.
you
Knowing that it would
85%
come
of the $205,000 on the revenue side.
Okay, so I will add revenue equal to 85% of the project cost.
And Phyllis, I know we've talked about this, and I know it's just another column, but can we just add what we do have in reserve so we can see what the net is of new dollars coming out? Knowing that the 3810 is still cash, but can we just add what we reserve for 2020?
I can add another column.
You all right with that, Steve?
Yeah.
You understand that that doesn't change the budget.
I understand.
Okay.
But I also think we should put in, if we're going to add for capital expenditures, even though it's not going to be done, but we're going to reserve dollars for it. I think the MS4 should be on here as well.
Okay, I will add additional 80. Jim, are you on this call?
Yes.
Okay. Is the appropriate amount to add to the 2021 budget for MS4 funding 80,000?
That's a correct number, yeah.
Okay, I will add that to the stormwater engineering line.
Well, hold it. If we do something with that $80,000, it should be one of these reserve funds. That's where it would go.
Correct.
Right, but it's still going to have a net effect on the total proposed budget.
Yeah. Correct.
No, yeah, that's what I'm proposing. I'm saying list the 277 as part of your funding coming from the reserve and adding proposing another $80,000 to be added to that 277 for the 2021 budget.
In agreement.
Which doesn't help your case for projects, but it does reserve dollars for the future.
Yep.
Okay, I will add that amount. All right, so we've reviewed the funded projects. I will make the change to remove the excess engineering fees for the multimodal projects, and I will add the funding for the playground improvement. We list all the items of unfunded. There's no potential sources of funding, and these come right from general fund revenues or the respective utility funds. Included in borough building maintenance repairs is $60,000 for a borough-wide camera system, $8,000 for treehouse garage doors. That was something that was planned for last year and deferred. And also a salt shed for the Hills area. Police vehicles. This is an area where yes, there is 17,000 in reserve that would offset the 153. The budget would still be for 153 to replace the car that was damaged in the current year and buy 2 additional Tahoes. The major equipment in the police department include light bars for the cars. I'm not quite sure how many light bars. I'd have to get the detail of that.
Is that light bars for the new police cars?
I think they get replaced along the way. But they're
I think it's a new light bar for the new car, Steve, and the remainder of that is mostly camera systems, both in car and body cam.
So what we're asking for is 153,000 less 17,000 to replace a car and add 2 more police cars.
Correct.
I think you got to put all that on hold until after some of this discussion's done.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, obviously they're not going to, at some point, some form of consolidation is probably going to happen, whether it's with both departments or one. Something's going to happen, and you're going to have too many cars.
Yeah, and you got to remember that if we do, all those vehicles go to that new regional agency and we lose them.
Yeah, so why would we want to be buying 2 new police cars when we could potentially be buying them and sending them an 8-month-old car, 2 8-month-old vehicles?
That's precisely correct.
Yeah.
So should I remove the 2 new vehicles and just keep the one that's being replaced?
Well, the one that's being replaced is already ordered, correct?
That's my understanding. Pat, can you confirm?
It's my understanding it's been ordered, but I'll confirm it.
I think it would be wise for us to just keep those on hold anyway until after this meeting in November. I know it's getting close, but I think we're going to know a lot more when we get a look at this new budget.
To keep what on hold, Tom?
The marked units, the Tahoes.
But should they stay in the budget or not? I guess that's the question.
Well, I think I would keep them there for the time being. You know, there's a good chance we could eliminate them. You know, if this proposed budget for the regionalization looks good, and we're all in agreement that that's the way we want to go, then we could take it out of the budget.
But knowing that the regionalization won't occur till at best case fourth quarter of 2021, you're still going to have all the expenditures for 2021 up until that point. I think we could probably make a decision now that even regardless of what's going to happen is we shouldn't buy 2 new police cars next year.
Well, I'm not sure what the condition of what they have now. You know, Pat would have to sit down with Lieutenant Endy and say, can we get them through another year?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Those cars take a hell of a beating in a year's time, really.
Let's face it, at minimum, we could get at least rid of one of those, I believe.
Probably so.
Let's talk to Tom and figure it out.
Okay.
So am I keeping 1? Keeping 2?
Listen, you're gonna have a hard time getting 2 past me no matter what they say. But I'm only one person, so I mean, I don't care. That's up to you. What's up to everybody else?
We got
one. I'm sorry, Tom. My recommendation would be to keep 1 Tahoe in, remove the second one.
All right, will do.
At least at this point, until we gain further. If we can get the second Tahoe cut, I'll take care of that as well.
Okay, I'll make that change. All right, moving on to the fire department. There is work for the fitness room and day room and the related equipment. Pat, do you have any comment on that? That's been in the budget. I think this would be the 3rd year.
No, those rooms were considered to be added last year as part of the study that was conducted in 2018, 2019 about refurbishing the fire station. Those were the 2 areas of safety, trying to get the fitness room retrofitted and new equipment. So that's where they're coming from. Our firefighters are currently under a new NFPA 1582 fitness program, which they're going through their physical program, which was all start of that. They currently do have a fitness room. If possible, we can try to look at getting the equipment, but delay the actual construction of anything in the fitness room.
Can I just a thought here as we're going through this? Can we, since the $439,000 that we had that's potentially coming back from dollars that have already been expended in 2020 from those projects, could we identify some of these items on here and say we're only going to do those items if and when we receive those dollars reimbursed, so that it would actually net a $0, so it would have funding coming in and fund them from this?
Keith, you're talking about the 40,000 from the alley grant, the 96 from the CARES Act, and
right,
the 303 from the DCED,
right? Which are out of our dollars. They're out of the fund balances. They've already been expended. So let's apply them to let's apply the potential reimbursement to the capital projects to reduce the deficit, but only do them if and when we receive those dollars.
Well, the DCED money, though, some of that is committed to Equus.
Okay, so net of that. So what did we say? 200,000?
Yes.
So 239,000. But I mean, that would cover it if we really think the borough camera system is necessary. If we think the fitness room, maybe funding some of those things from those dollars.
Especially because the fitness room, and I'm trying to think of what on here we wanted to do in 20 that we didn't do, that we could use the funding that's still coming in. So obviously those, I lost my page, sorry, but obviously that fitness for the fire and police, for the fire department was part of the budget in 20. I assume the furnishings for were also. Yes,
Correct.
it's delayed. There you go.
It was.
The garage doors at the treehouse were.
Okay.
Jim would have to comment
Just
on
out of
that.
curiosity, the borough-wide camera system, is that for security purposes, I would assume?
That's Council Member Boucher had basically requested that, and that is for camera systems here at Borough Hall, and that includes cameras at all of our facilities. The reason why it's a fairly high expenditure is the fact that our playgrounds are remote. We'd have to have internet service provided so that the cameras transmit that signal.
Well, is the purpose for security?
Correct.
Yeah.
For security operations.
Have we had any issues at any of these locations?
We've had a few in the past, not as many this year. I can't give you a total history of why the cameras were installed. There were some cameras installed at Happy Hollow and Wyomissing Hills in the pool previously. Those were onboard systems at each one of the places that didn't travel anywhere. If you had a problem, you had to go to that site and download that information.
Sure.
Those systems are still in place. This would also include putting a new system at the Stone House, which there is currently no security systems for video. We do have alarm systems.
Okay. And Jim Babb, if you're still there, are all the borough trucks still monitored for where they're going?
Yes. I don't want to say all, but.
When's the last, just out of curiosity, when's the last time anybody's reviewed it?
Last night.
I get daily reports on it as well.
Actually, Pat he can speak to it. He had to review it yesterday for a reason. It doesn't happen often, but there are times you need it.
Okay. I'll run with that. Okay.
All right. I think the next major items are the public work major equipment requests. And I do have some attachments here so Jim can describe the condition of what we have and the need for the newer equipment. So Melissa, if you can advance to some of these, there we go. Jim, take it away.
And that's the truck we want to replace with a new $90,000, very similar dump truck with snowplow and spreader. It just becomes, for me, a reliability thing when it comes to leaf collection and snow plowing. That we have trucks that are reliable, and this one's getting to the point where it's not.
What year is that, Jim?
I don't have that in front of me. Do you have that in front of you, Phyllis, from the sheet I gave you?
It is a 2003.
Okay. Yeah. It's time.
Okay.
Next item.
This is, Rob had tried to put this in the budget last year and it failed. I'm putting it in again. This is a little different scenario in that those top pictures are our current tractor and our current arm, what I call the arm mower. It's not that they're antiquated or old. I'd say they're probably half or 2/3 of the way through their lifetime, but things keep changing, and that arm can only extend 10 feet, maybe 13 feet off the machine, and most of you probably don't notice, but we are doing more and more of this road bank mowing, Berkshire Boulevard, Crossing Drive, Woodland Road, the park trails, some sewer right-of-ways behind Berkshire Boulevard. And a few years ago, we rented a larger tractor and a larger boom mower to try to really knock some of these trees back. And it worked like a charm. So we want to purchase our own to do that. And along with the arm mower, there's another attachment you'll see at the bottom, a flail mower that we use to mow the big fields out in the parkland. Right now, with the setup we have, I can't say as far as time goes, but from listening to Dwayne, the guy who runs it, he said if we have this new machine, we could literally do it in a quarter of the time that we do it with our current machine. But it's very pricey. It's well over 200 grand for the tractor and those two implements. 268, yeah.
Can you rent a flail? Can you rent one of those flail mowers?
Well, I didn't want to bring that up to one of you guys brought it up, but if we can't bite off the purchase of one of these, yes, we can rent, and I think if we go that route, we'd rent it for 2 weeks this year as opposed to a week, which we've done before, with an expense of roughly $12,000.
Well,
I get it, man. It's a lot of money.
yeah.
And does it make life more efficient for what it does? That's the difference.
Well, I can see how the when you factor in the employee cost to run it, offsetting the 12,000 much easier than I can to see the employee savings and the maintenance added to the $268,000. It's just my opinion for now. So
How many
I guess what I'm getting at is I like the renting option better than the buying option.
Yeah, how many are you using it like 2 weeks a year, Jim? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's more than that. When he does this road bank mowing, it's 2 or 3 weeks in the spring, 2 or 3 weeks in the fall. And I would say the same with the field mowing. There's a spring mowing and a fall mowing, each of those taking a couple weeks. So, no, it's more than occasional, but it's not every day either.
But the flail mower you only use 2 weeks a year.
No, 2 weeks, like 2 weeks in the spring. There's a spring round we do, and then a fall round we do. We just did some, a week or two ago, in addition to what he did in the spring.
But the total rental cost you think is 12,000 versus 268.
Yeah, and if we rented it, we just probably rent it once in the spring and do as much as we possibly can.
Well, even if you used it the way you would normally do it and rent it, it's still quite a bit of money you're saving, and you don't have the having to maintain it or store it.
No.
I agree with Steve. I think it'd be wiser to just rent it when you need it and want to do it and get it over with. You're doing a lot for the state too. You're cutting back on Berkshire Boulevard or around the state-owned properties.
Yeah, and the Tom Boucher always has that issue with Penn Avenue west of Clayton Avenue, and this machine, our current machine, can't do it. That rental machine can, because you're on the road, you have sidewalk, you have guide rail, and to get on the other side of that guide rail, you got to have longer extension.
Yeah, I understand that, but I agree. Rental at this particular point in time would be more advantageous for us.
Thoughts? Anybody else in the group?
I agree with renting. I don't think we can have, we've got to reduce this deficit.
I agree.
Sorry, Jim.
I understand. That's a lot of money. I get it.
Next.
We put in for a recycling grant for this leaf collector. As with all this other state funding, we haven't heard back yet. In the past, we've never missed one of these. We've always applied and got. but I can't say with certainty.
Phyllis, what's in the budget, 8,500 or 85,000?
I have revenue of 76.5. I have an expense of 85. So the net is in there at 8,500.
Okay.
Because we've had experience in obtaining these grants in the past.
Good, but sad. Okay.
Are we sure about the grant?
We're not sure. No.
This is another one of those that we would not purchase without the grant, right?
Right, right.
I would say that would be if the grants get announced and we do not receive it. Could we postpone it another year? Yeah.
Okay. So leave the 8,500 in there because there's no sense not getting the 76.5 from the state. Okay. Agreed, everybody?
Yep.
There's additional equipment that Jim has requested that I do not have photographs for. There is a plate compactor. Jim, can you describe that?
Yeah, I don't even know if this should really be in the capital budget, but it's a small plate compactor that we use when we're blacktopping in tight spots. It's like $2,000. The current one we had, I don't know how old it was, 20 years old, and it died. But it's a small expense. And then Jake, our mechanic, has asked for approximately $3,000 worth of garage tools that he needs: jack stands, an axle jack, cooling system pressure tester, and a 3-ton floor jack. All of those around $3,000.
What's that under, Jim? Or Phyllis, where is that under in the expense?
That same $300,000 line.
Yeah, I have that all in the Public Works equipment line, just because that's how I received the request from Jim. They can be removed from capital and they could be put into operating if you deem appropriate.
Some of those items for the mechanic are safety items, I'm sure. So especially the jack stands and the floor jacks.
Okay, I can reclassify them and remove them from the capital budget.
So the 363, Phyllis, there's nothing in the capital funding. Do you have the revenue for the grant someplace else?
The leaf picker is up in the top section. It's the last line under refuse major equipment.
Got it. Sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
And Tom Mull, just something with this possible police merger. I don't know if police car maintenance has been discussed at all, but somehow it should be between all parties because they take a lot of maintenance, mechanic-wise.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. I'd just say something to Tom Endy about that, Jim.
Now, that has been considered. Part of the information I've gathered for Tom has been information on Jake's rates.
Okay.
And he's applied, certain hours of police maintenance to Jake's rates.
I have no idea what Spring Township does, their cars, or West Reading for that matter.
But unless you're going to eliminate a position, you can't really take it out as a savings, even if you do move it.
Well, you wouldn't be eliminating a position. He's still doing all the borough work.
Then it wouldn't come out as a cost reduction.
No.
Okay. So we're talking about the $268,000 will be coming out with the adding in of the $12,000 of rental potential.
Yes.
Okay. We'll get on to the next major one of the road reconstruction, street reconstruction.
Want me to speak to that, Phyllis?
Sure. The numbers I've used were based on previous bids. My understanding is they need to be rebid. So those are not fixed costs at this point.
So Jim, let me ask
Council
Jim.
will have those numbers in December. I think it was going to be a December award. It's the same 3 streets as last year. Reading Boulevard from Clayton to Squire, including including some stormwater improvements down there by the circle at Dr. Sweet's house. Hill Avenue from Park to 8th, and Cherrywood Drive over in Greenwood Mall that is actually out of the water fund because we put the water main in there a few years back. So we've been taking those paving numbers out of the water fund.
So what we're doing basically is for the street reconstruction is we push back to 2020 to 2021.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we're not adding what, you know, the 5-year plan, Jim, that would have been done in 2021 is not included in that. That'll basically get pushed to 2022.
Correct. We're just duplicating last year. We're not duplicating and adding. It's just duplicating.
Okay.
That's true regarding the street work. However, Jim and I this morning discussed the sidewalk program, which I believe might be in its last year. Jim, do you want to address the number of applications received last year that were not completed, plus the current year?
Yeah, we have about, by the time we decided not to do it last year, I think we were up to close to 40 applications. And then they all got letters, hey, we're going to postpone this. I'm assuming we'll have more applicants this coming spring, in addition to the 40 that we have from last year. So it could be, you know, roughly 70 properties looking to take advantage of that program.
And it's $1,000 each they get, correct?
They get half the cost reimbursed up to $1,000.
So most people do $1,000, right?
Price for sidewalk is around $15 a square foot. So we pay $7.50, they pay $7.50 per square foot.
And the average reimbursement's close to $1,000, I would assume.
Yeah, 500 to 1,000, I'd say is average.
Well, I mean, I would propose that we just do last year's, don't take new ones for this year and just take the ones that we did not do for last year.
That's fine. The only thing I would caution is, do we call this the last year of the program if we don't let people get on? You know, that's the only question I would have.
Well, was 2021 supposed to be the last year?
Yeah, well, last year was supposed to be the last. Then we put on another year because we postponed everything.
But the public thought in 2021 they'd have another year left.
That's correct.
Yeah, well then I wouldn't say this is the last year. I'd say 2022 is the last year, and just do the ones. Listen, I'm just one person, and it's not a huge number, but at the end of the day, let's do the 2020. The people who've applied were approved. Let's get those done. And then we'll open it up one more year for the following year.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
We okay with that?
Yeah.
So just to confirm my understanding, the 2021 expense will be those that were delayed from 2020.
Correct.
And no new applications will be accepted this year, but we'll keep the program open next year.
Correct.
Okay.
That's how I envision it. That's up to you guys. Everybody else do.
I think from an infrastructure standpoint, it makes sense.
The only thing I would, another chime in here is, you know, over the course of the last 4 or 5 months, I get a call 2 or 3 times a week about the program. And I've told people that we were going to do it this coming spring. It got postponed last year. We're going to do it this spring. So if I could have the caveat that if somebody calls me and says, hey, you told me we were going to do it this spring, that I would accept a handful more of applications. But if it's a cold call from here on out, or somebody walks in off the street in April and says, I want the sidewalk program, we'll say, no, we're not doing it. But people who I've already conversed with, I don't know, 10 people.
Do you have a list of who they were?
No, I do not.
Because they're going to tell their neighbor.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. Didn't we just say what we postponed from last year, we're going to do this year, and we're going to budget that this year? So didn't I just hear that you're going to consider it for 2022 also?
Yep.
In which case we would accept new applicants.
Yeah, we would accept new applicants in 2022, but we're not accepting anything new this year.
Right, exactly. Okay. Jim raised a question. I'm just saying, he has the ability to at least say, yeah, we're going to do it one more year after this, but no new ones for the current year, but we're going to accept applications for the next year.
That's fine.
Steve, can I ask you a question?
No.
And I guess since I'm new to this, I'm asking the committee and those that have had experience in the past. If we back up away from all of this and go back to the original, here's how much money we have in the bank, and go back to an 85,000 foot level and look down on this whole thing. If you look down on it, if what I'm hearing is correct, Phyllis, the operations part of the borough is a break even based on the projected revenue coming in, or close to it. So
that's a fair statement, yes.
So all of these capital projects or anything else we approve has to come out of the fund reserves. So it's going to come out of the cash reserves. There may be some funding coming here and there, and we're trying to net all of that out, and we're cutting some expenses. But what is the committee's overall appetite of how much money we're actually going to physically take out of the reserves and apply to these capital expenditures? Because until we talk about any kind of tax increases, which it looks like even a modest tax increase isn't even going to come close to covering these deficits. Is there a number that the committee is should we be working backwards and saying we're willing to commit $2 million from the reserve fund, and then we decide what capital projects should be done based on what can be done for the $2 million? Or is the committee okay with saying it's $3 million and we're going to run our reserves down to $4 million versus 5 versus 6? I guess we're sitting here talking about, cutting 10,000 here, adding 10,000, moving it here, moving it there. But the bottom line is there's not enough revenue coming in to fund any of these projects, which means anything that does has to come out of those capital reserves. And, I'm asking Greg and John and these guys that have been on and Tom that have been on these committees for a long time. At what point do you say, I don't want to spend any more dollars? I don't know the answer, and I don't have the history to know the answer.
Yeah, that's a big question, Keith, and that is true. I mean, if you have a break-even scenario, anything above that is either going to come under fund balance or a tax increase. So which do you do first, or what blend do you do? I mean, I think that's where Steve's going with this whole thing, and where we have to go every year. So, what's the tolerance? What are the conditions like? What's happening in the community? So that you have to balance all those things, and what do you really need, and what would you like to have, and what must you really have? I don't know if we discussed that yet as far as these projects are concerned.
Well, that's why I'm not sure that we shouldn't go back to what the cash balances projections are based on revenue and say, here's the budget, establish a dollar number budget, and now what projects do you fit into that dollar budget number?
Well, we budgeted last year, $1,080,000 of a deficit. We came in at
surplus of 328.
But that was by eliminating every project we had.
No, I get it. No, I understand.
I mean, that's great. If we could do that every year, you're going to make, you don't have a problem anymore. But I don't think Jim Babb's going to go for that.
No, I wasn't. That's not where I was going with it. But I was saying, if we want to say, hey, we're going to budget, if we're going to budget a deficit, I wouldn't want to budget more than we budgeted last year when we didn't use any of it. I understand it was special or this year. It's special circumstances and all that other good stuff, but I don't think we can budget more than $1 million roughly of using the deficit. I just don't think we can.
Well, then what I think you're looking at is you're saying you take the reserves that we set aside and add $1 million to it, because that's where I think when Phyllis did the original projections of the cash where we're going to be, what was the net of reserve number, Phyllis? 7 million?
The total fund balance after the items were reserved was 7.5.
Yeah, so we'd be down to 6.5.
Yeah, so that's what you're saying is you're saying take those items that we like the Borough Hall, the items that the 160,000 out of the sewer, take those items out of here and say, all right, now what do we have left? And put a number to it and say, what can we do for between $1 million and 1.5 million?
Yeah, I wasn't exactly saying that, to be honest with you.
Oh, All right. That's what I'm saying then.
I'd like to keep it to the point where if our reserve, if we end up with a positive balance of 200 and some odd thousand, 300 some odd $1,000, right, Phyllis?
You're talking about just operations?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about right.
Well, but that's for the whole year. That includes the capital projects that were done.
Right. Correct.
I'm not sure I'm following you.
So the 328 is net of all expenses, whether it's operations or whether it's capital.
That's everything.
Yeah, that's everything.
Plus the
I
pending.
wasn't looking to
grant
take
reimbursement.
another million. I was looking to take a $1,080,000 plus that 300 and some odd $1,000 and saying that's what I would look as a deficit for 2021, inclusive of any of those.
Well, then you're not looking at doing any of these projects.
Correct. We're not looking at many of them, right?
No, none. You're not looking at any. I mean, if you do that, you're not looking at anything. I don't think you can do that. I mean, I don't know how you.
I agree.
Some of the
Listen,
sewer and
that's
water
where I'd
work.
like to start. That's my starting point. Is where I'm getting at, I guess. Okay.
Do we want to continue down this list? Do we want to circle back to revenues? How would you
Let's
like
go
to
down. Let's
proceed?
just finish this list off.
All right, so Jim's addressed the street reconstruction. The next item listed under rec improvements was a pool cover. That was something Rob had requested. Jim, you've evaluated that cover. What's your conclusion?
I think we can get another couple of years out of it.
Strike it. Next.
All right, the next is maintenance at the library. There's still talk about a new roof and a new air conditioning system.
I'd like to add to this that Colleen and I are intending to submit for a grant that would cover at least 50% of the cost for both the HVAC system and the roof.
So
what's the likelihood of that?
She felt we had a pretty good chance of getting it.
So we're talking about $230,000 worth of expense, and you're sending the funding reimbursement.
Like funding reimbursement of 115, and that's the lowest potential match option. She wants to evaluate, there's a couple programs that open in February of 2021. She wants to evaluate which of those programs, based off their guidelines and regulations change every year. So based off of the 2021 version that opens, she wants to see which one would most likely be the best fit for us. So low match of 50% with a potential match of only 20%. But I would assume 50%.
So you're saying anywhere from 50 to 80% reimbursement.
Correct. I would assume 50% for budget, just worst case scenario.
Well, then that can fall into one of those categories that will do it if we get the funding.
And,
So
and only put in the dollars that would be needed to offset.
So the 115,000 would be the dollars that need to be set.
If I could interrupt for a second, the roof, we were having some leaking issues. Muthar Roofing went up and did some repair work. I haven't heard anything from Colleen about additional leaks, so I'm going to assume at this point we're not leaking. The air conditioners is for the newer, what we keep calling the newer side of the library, but the newer side is now, I forget what year that was, but I think it's pushing 15 years. And there's two units there, and they're running on a shoestring from what I gather from the vendor. And if I could, my recommendation, if you will, would be, hey, we can hold off the roof and try to get the grant money, but I think doing the air conditioner, grant money or not, should probably be done.
Okay, then we'd have the budget $30,000 for the air conditioning.
Well, but budget 115, and if you don't get the funding, you're covered for the air conditioning, and you're not doing the roof.
Right.
So you don't have to add the
Okay,
30.
that's
Just
fair.
put
Yeah, good
150.
point. Yep,
Is
I
there
agree.
still
That's
not
fair.
an outstanding issue? Chris, is there still not an outstanding legal issue going on, or is that over?
I'm having discussions with Restore Corps about the roof contract, but I don't have any answers today. But
Chris, while we're bugging you, the maintenance of the $630,000 for the Borough Hall project. What is our responsibility, and do we have to move forward with that in 2021?
we have a change order that provides that the project is pushed forward to 2021, and there is a condition in that change order that the pricing is open to discussion, meaning that Dolan could say that he needs a little more money, or maybe it comes down. But in any event, there would have to be a discussion about the amount that we would pay him to complete the contract in 2021. If the council wants to push it into 2022, that would require another change order and more discussion with Dolan. I mean, certainly, since it's already been pushed back a year, I'm not sure that it wouldn't be a problem to push it another year, because they're not doing anything to prepare to perform at this point. So anyway, bottom line is we could push it off if we negotiate another change order with Dolan.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yes. Anybody else have any questions on that? I went out of order. I apologize. All right, so we're striking the pool cover. We're going to do a net of 115 for the library. Is that a fair statement?
Right.
What about Monroe?
This was pushed back from last year. It's one block of Monroe Avenue from Wyoming to Forest. I know we have some bad valves in there. I believe it's transite pipe. But as I mentioned with the sewer work, at least water pipe ages in regular years. Sewer pipe, always say ages in dog years. So like to get it done, but if push comes to shove, it can wait another year.
Okay. Thoughts?
Can't keep pushing too much infrastructure back, or you're going to have problems. You can't.
No, I agree.
I mean, that's one thing. I mean, between the water and the sewer lines, there's a lot of things that can suffer. But Jim, if you have problems with that, I'm assuming that's going to be your biggest issue. Jim, you were supposed to say yes there.
Yes.
I was trying to help you, Jim. You're supposed to say yes.
Here's a caveat. The water main, 87 grand, is not a large number as we're talking numbers here. The capital sewer is 460, which was last year's work, which we've already bid and awarded, and 300,000 for the real 2021 sewer. And one concession we could do here is I could still get a decent amount of work done. We have 160 for this year and 300 for next year. If we made next year's number 200 for a total of 360,000, I think is tolerable.
Then I think we should do that.
Yeah, if you can't make it 150.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Jim, can you make that the minimum of 100 grand reduction?
Yeah, I'm saying we already know this year's going to be around 160, and
Right.
next year we'll bid it with the estimate that we're going to come in around 200 grand as opposed to 300 grand. That's what I'm proposing.
All right. Well, like we said before, we don't want the sewer going bad, so I think you should at least try to get it to $200,000.
I mean, if we can bite off all 300, I'll gladly use it. But I
can't.
understand the situation.
All right. I would take the 100,000 out of that then.
Will do.
Thoughts? Anybody else?
I still think you need to go back, make all these changes. My suggestion would be you make all these changes.
Right.
Then you go back and you look at what the revenue is, and maybe you just factor in a small tax increase, just something very small, just so that it's not zero, but it's not anything that's gonna bite. And then look at the water rates again, and then relook at it and see where we are. See where the ending.
I think that's part of that's this meeting is to get to that meeting, right, Phyllis?
Correct. I'm just looking for guidance to make changes and modifications to come back with a draft too.
All right.
I think the big issue is going to be is where are you with cash? What's your cash projection at the end of next year, considering all these projects, net of whatever funding we might get, and then look at what we've reserved from last year and what the new dollars are and where we end up with cash by next year. And is that acceptable?
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree to that.
Steve, I checked with Lieutenant Endy, and car 9, the car that was damaged, has been ordered and is due in 2021.
So we're obligated for car number 9. Got it.
We're obligated for car number 9, but not obligated for any further.
We're not obligated for the 2 Tahoes. Got it.
Correct.
My last notes indicate you would like to keep one of those Tahoes in the budget for now.
For now.
Okay.
Do you want Pat or I to have any conversation with Dolan about flexibility on pushing off that roof project, or not, the window project, I should say?
Tom Mull, your thoughts?
Well, I think you're going to have to. We've got too many projects and not enough money. Bottom line.
I mean, if we're going to end up paying the 630,000, I think we at least need to consider using some of the funds, the potential of the borrowing of the funds for that part.
Yeah, I would agree to that. That was one of the reasons we got the line of credit anyway, to offset some of these big projects that we've got. I don't know. I would like to go ahead and get that project finished. We've been fooling around with that Borough Hall for the last 10 years. So,
well, is there a way that we can discuss maybe potentially getting, a third of that part process done as opposed to the whole thing done, and then pushing off the 2/3 to another year?
we could. It's going to take some conversation with Dolan, and again, that would even with Cowder, see what they could do without affecting everything else, or if they do the upper level and work and just do the ground level last.
So yes, Chris, let's move forward with the discussions.
The other thing is, just gentlemen, on the Borough Hall renovations, some of that is some significant removal of windows and exposure and moving of personnel, moving of desks and so forth. So I just really need to keep an eye on that from our COVID situation as far as the, staff operations here at Borough Hall.
So you're saying because of COVID, you don't want to move people around too much while they're redoing the windows?
I prefer not to, no. Especially, with the unknowns after the first of the year, we certainly see what it's doing now.
And you don't want to have workmen in Borough Hall too, is that correct, Pat?
And that's what my concern is, because we really, while they have a plan, we don't have control.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like our story. We're going to run with it.
Okay.
Okay.
So do you recommend removing the Borough Hall renovations from draft 2?
I'm going to say yes. Agreed? Bueller? Anybody see that movie? Bueller? Yes, no, maybe so.
Maybe leave half of it in until after Chris talks to him.
Well, Okay, I get it, Keith, because you want to be conservative, but if we take it all out and if we decide it where it has to be done, can be done and has to be done, maybe we use the line of credit. Well, we'd still have to use some of it this year, though. You're right. You're right.
I agree.
So
Yeah,
let's just take it out for now, and we'll deal with that separately in a separate type of budget within the budget. How's that sound? Fair?
Sounds good, yeah.
Does anyone know if there's any expiration on the ability to use that credit? I don't remember the terms well enough to answer that.
I don't know.
I do not know the expiration of the line because the line was expanded to include potential funding needed for 4th Street. That if we had times when we needed the cash waiting for reimbursement, but we still needed to pay the contractor, that we had a source to borrow on. So the line covers both purposes at this point. And I'll have to confirm the expiration date.
Yeah, I would recommend, Phyllis, that you make sure we understand what the terms are with regard to our ability to use that.
Will do.
Steve, if I may, please. Question for Chris. Chris, have you heard any rumors? I heard from 2 different contractors that I guess the state house representative is considering a bill that would alleviate, due to COVID, any change orders that would affect a municipality or local government as a result of COVID. Have you heard anything to that effect?
No, I'm not aware of that. That's very interesting. I don't understand really what the impact of that would be from what you're describing. I mean, certainly I'd like to know more about it though.
Yeah, for what I've heard, and I'll try to get more information, but for what I've heard is as a way to relax some financial burdens from having a contract that's been awarded, but because of COVID, change order had to be issued to extend the contract, and that a municipality would not be penalized for it.
Well, I'd like to hear more about that. I mean, is that a cram down on the contractors, that the contractors can't ask for more money if the contract is postponed? Is that?
As I understand it, that is correct.
Wow.
I don't know who introduced the bill. I don't know, maybe, Judy Schrank can give us some.
Well, this sounds like a phone call that Michelle could have with our lobbyist and get an answer. That's my recommendation.
I can take care of that.
Yeah, like I said, I just heard this from 2 different contractors, and basically what I've told you is what they've told me. That's all I know about it.
I'd like to hear more about that.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on.
Right, so we've covered all the capital expenditures. I'll make the modifications we talked about in draft 2. Draft 2 will most likely have October results as the month end is on Friday. So at this point, we can either review detail by department, or we can schedule a time to regroup. Melissa has the calendar up behind the agenda. We want to be watchful. Ideally, the Finance Committee, which will meet next Thursday, our regularly scheduled time to review the October results, would be making a recommendation if we were prepared at that time so that council could approve the budget for advertisement. If we're unable to meet that schedule, then special meetings of council would be required. So where do we want to go from here with the next scheduled meeting being next Thursday?
I'm looking at calendars, sorry. Anybody interested in meeting on Monday?
I actually have payroll to prepare on Monday.
Okay, Tuesday at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I think,
Tuesday, November 3rd, 8 o'clock.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Anything I would present on Tuesday, the 3rd, would not have complete October results in it. I don't know that we're really focused on year-to-date results at this point, but rather revising the proposal for 2021. So if you're okay with not having October results in that document, then I can be prepared for Tuesday with a draft too.
Well, I think Tuesday's sole purpose is to meet about the budget. So
Okay. Then we can discuss the October results. I actually have some pension details that we need to address at Thursday's meeting.
okay, and we'll try to keep it to not 2 hours. But let me ask you this though, for the purpose of that meeting, do we want to, on the revenue side, factor in a minimal increase on the water, again, a user tax, and a minimal increase on the millage? We might as well face what we're looking at and talk about, you know, do we want to just say, hey, if we did the same rate increase this year as we did last and hope we can reduce it from there? And maybe what did you say the cost for the water was going up 3% overhead in the first place?
At this point, their estimates that has not been confirmed until each of their boards meet.
I mean, I would at least factor in that 3% increase. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I would agree.
yeah, I would agree to that.
Okay, what
So,
about millage?
Uh,
Pick a number. Melissa, can you scroll forward to the real estate tax? One more. One more. There we go. On the bottom there.
yeah.
For
So we're at
example, if we went from 4.25 up to 4.5, the additional revenue potential is 250,000.
5.88% increase.
Correct.
Yeah, let's run with that one.
Yeah, sounds like a good one.
2.5 or
0.25.
up to 4.5. Okay, we'll do.
Steve, with the committee's permission, before we meet again on the 3rd, so I could fill us information, I'll try to do it today, is to speak with the police department, the fire department, and so forth, and see if there's any cuts we can make from department level budgets before it comes back to the committee. Would you be acceptable to that?
And include them on for the meeting for next Tuesday?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be okay with that.
Okay. Just gives me time to talk to Chief
I'd be
Hackman.
thrilled with that, Pat.
All right, let me see what I can do.
How do you feel about including in revenue the grant awards or the grant reimbursements that are pending? Should I include the 40,000 from the alley grant? Should I include the 96 from the CARES Act?
I think you should, because I think some of those projects won't get done. I think that's going to be looking at saying we're not going to do them unless we get those. So I would put them in the funding, because we can always just cut them out. Otherwise, because that's going to be your net.
But not the 439. You're putting in the net of 239.
Well,
Yeah,
I can put in the 303 that we've applied for, and I can reserve 200 of it, if
Okay.
that's the appropriate amount.
Yeah, and then the other two revenue sources. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that. Anybody else? I know it's a long meeting. Sorry, folks. Okay. Let's run with that too. Anything else, Phyllis,
No,
that you'll need for the meeting on Tuesday?
they're going Tuesday at 8 o'clock.
Mhm.
Phyllis, can you do that revenue comparison for 19, 20, and projection for 21? You
Could
said you have that?
Can you, no, I'll say, I have the information to put it together. What are you looking for?
Go back 2 slides. I'm just curious what it was for, what the actuals were for, or what your projections are for 20 and what the actuals were for 19 for that.
Okay, so you went 20 and 19,
Right.
general, just the general fund revenue by category.
Yep, just like this, but just 19 and projections for 20.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else for the good of the order? I'm tasked out at this point. Anybody else in the committee have anything for the group?
No.
No.
Okay, everybody good for next Tuesday at 8?
Yeah.
Should do it like my boss does. Everybody's got to stay on the camera next time. All right. Meeting.
Phyllis, I'll see you at noon Monday.
Meeting adjourned.
Have a good day, everyone.
Oh, look at that. Big body shot. Look at these guys. All right.